Hello there. Thank you for watching this video. I'm Laura Dougal and this is my friend and colleague Sarah Turner, and we're both maternity return and working parent coaches. Um, this video we're going to be talking about what does having a baby mean for my career, and we're going to just explore a few areas that we would work on with clients during coaching sessions to sort of show how we might come to answer that question, because we all know that the answer to that will be completely different for everybody. There is no one stock answer of what impact having a baby is going to have on your career. But in working with a coach at that time, as you're returning to work or starting back into work again after having children, these are that we're going to share some of the questions that we would bring in to sessions with our clients. Is there anything you want to add to that, Sarah, before we get started?
No, I think that's a great introduction. I think sometimes it's easy to overlook the magnitude of the transition. I think, and I would speak in I was absolutely this before I went off on maternity with my first daughter, and I see it a lot with my clients before we go off on leave, because we can't quite comprehend what's about to happen. I mean, obviously we know in principle what's going to happen, but the reality or the impact of it, I think that this is something that it can be easily overlooked or minimized. Perhaps we don't necessarily comprehend just quite how much it can change things up, and so it can take a while. I often describe it a little bit as, having a baby is a little bit like having the rug pulled out from under your feet, and you're sort of thrown up into the air whilst you're on leave and being a parent and figuring it all out. And when you return to work, it's as if it takes a while sometimes for your feet to kind of find their space. You might kind of land and then you come back up again, and then you might land and you come back up again. And that, how long that takes is going to be different for everybody. But it can be really quite unsettling. And so it does throw up all sorts of questions around, can I do this? What does this mean? Am I now different? How do I manage all of that?
Yeah, and I would add into that, as always, in being devil's advocate, that also may not be your experience. And that's what we find, isn't it, Sarah, is that dealing with, when we're working, we work with different people going through the same transition all the time. And I don't know about you, but I have never had the same exact experience with a client as somebody else. Everybody's completely different. So absolutely what Sarah is describing may well be your experience. Other people that I know have just seamlessly, gone back to work, and it hasn't created that bigger an issue for them. So, it just depends. And that's why I suppose we're going to share coaching questions rather than like a stock answer of like, this is the impact that it will have. And that's what we would do with clients, is to explore that for you personally. What is the impact?
Exactly. And what I would add to that actually also is that you might find that if you have more than one child, your experience after the first child can be quite different to the experience after your second. That was my experience, and I've seen it with some of my clients as well. And so there isn't one right way to do this, because if there was, you and I'd be out of a job.
Yeah, and there'd also just be a book probably written about it, which we could all just refer to. So that would be really handy.
10 steps to how to do this. Yeah, if only it was that simple. So, I mean, if we sort of start off, then I guess we've already started to kind of speak to this, is everything changes, right? When you've had a baby and you're thinking about coming back to work, even those of us who are lucky enough to find that transition to be smooth, things have still changed. Because whereas before, your life was one way, now there's a little person that needs to be factored into your life in some way, whatever that looks like. And that does mean that things have to change.
Mm.
And that can bring up all sorts of questions, can't it, for clients? What are sorts of things you notice in your work?
Yeah, and I think to add to that as well, this thing about change. So I spoke to somebody today. I speak to people actually regularly since the pandemic as well, more so, of this sort of feeling of I went on maternity leave. Obviously, things have changed in my personal life. I'm now a parent. That's changed my family dynamic at home. But it feels like change at work has really like fast tracked actually. So people are coming back to work, but their team has changed, their line managers changed, the type of work that the organization is doing has changed sometimes. Things in the wider world have changed. So I feel like actually there's a lot more change than you might realize. So when you're going on maternity leave, you know that you are about to enter this period of change. But I think what does take people by surprise sometimes is that coming back to work, you feel like you're sort of going to re-enter, back to this world that you know. And that often, in my experience, more so at this time, isn't the case. That's another big change. So I think in terms of coaching questions and how we bring that into sessions is looking at, when you made the decision to work in this role, in this organization, what was important to you at that time? How did you make that decision? What were you getting from that role then? And then looking at, so here you are now, as you are as a person, as you are as a parent, and looking at the work that you're doing and how has that changed? And then how has what you need from your work, given that, changed as well? And what decision would you be making today if you were making that decision again? So as a starting point to really think about, what is it that I'm getting from work? What do I need at the moment? And sometimes that might be, it's all financial. I need to earn the money to pay for XYZ. It might be career progression is really important to me, and I've always been very career focused, and that hasn't changed. It might be about intellectual stimulation. It could be lots and lots of different things, but I think that's a really great starting point, is just reflecting on, like, where am I now, what was happening before, and what's happening now, just to get that perspective.
Absolutely. And I find that sometimes that can take some time, because sometimes it's quite difficult to accept that actually I can't have the same relationship with my career as I did. And I'm not saying that's true for everyone, because it's not. But sometimes it does throw up. And I'm going to use the word difficulty because I think it's just about, oh, this feels different. I'm not quite sure how I deal with this. And I've got a client I'm working with at the moment, and she's very high powered, very driven, very successful, has enjoyed a very, very successful career. And having a baby has really prompted her to rethink a lot of all of that, where she got meaning before, where she got her sense of success from, what success meant to her before, what success means to her now, and what does that mean in terms of how she is, who she is at work. And I often emphasize this is just right now, because what feels important right now might change over time. We'll come back to that a bit later on, but it's picking up on your question, it's who am I now? What does that mean to me now? And I think just really spending time with a coach, giving yourself that space to reflect on what is different, what has changed, also what's the same, right? Because some things may be the same.
Yeah, I think that's one of the questions probably that I work with clients the most on, which is surprising to them. But that question of, like, who am I? Just a very simple question of who am I? Because things like, and obviously as coaches, we'll talk about and think about values a lot of the time, might not be something that you think about or have thought about if you've not worked with a coach before. But essentially, the things that are important to us, which are our values, change over time and go through, I would say, a big transition when we become parents, because this value tends to come in of family that might have been important before, but now it's like a bigger, making this sort of, but it's like a bigger rock for us. And that's what I find a lot with clients, I think, is that they're sort of previously, like, family had been down here and work was a really big value, or just, very important. And then all of a sudden family grows, and it's that happening where it's like, what's going to win today? Is it going to be family? Is it going to be work? So I think that does change, and answering that question about who am I. And I think also within that, of thinking about what's important about work, one of the things that might not have been a consideration previously that becomes one when you're a parent is about, what am I role modeling to my child? So that certainly happened for me, was just thinking, I'm in a job that I like, it's good enough, I earn good enough money, I work with nice people, etc., etc. But when I had my daughter, I just sort of saw my life through a different lens of, what's she going to think about me, when she's growing up? And that was my sort of drive, that I was more driven after I'd had her, because the idea that she would be looking at what I was doing. And I think that happens a lot, I would certainly say, with people that I work with, that sort of legacy role modeling part But we just, like you say, you don't know what you don't know, that you can't think about that before you have children. It happens after.
Yeah, and I think, I came across, I can't remember who, I must find this and be able to credit the person, but I came across this phrase greedy job. And if you are in a relationship with a partner and you've both got what I would call a greedy job, so in essence it's a job that demands a lot of you, your time and your energy, to put it really simply. And lots of us do hold greedy jobs. Lots of my clients have what I would call greedy jobs. And if them and their partner have a greedy job, then it's really, the question then becomes, I want to do this. This is important to me. It's an important part of what makes me me. It's an important part of reflecting what I've worked towards all this time. I am very ambitious, very driven, and I want the best for myself, my family, etc., etc. Then the question becomes, okay, fine, brilliant. That's what's important to you. Again, come back to values. That's important to you. What is it you need to put in place to kind of give you that platform, that structure that's going to hold you up, enable you to be able to operate at full pelt? And often that'll be things like, a full-time nanny or a live-in nanny, or maybe there's a support structure, maybe family nearby if you're lucky enough to have that. Obviously, it's different for everybody and there's not a right or a wrong here. But I guess what I want to offer is that nothing is perfect. So even if you have the most phenomenal childcare arrangement and you love your job and your partner loves their job, I've got clients like that, and they still feel guilty that they're not available for their child in the way that maybe they ideally feel they should be. You've got other people who are, as you say, maybe in a job that pays the bills but maybe isn't that fulfilling. So there is no magic pill, there is no magic bullet here. There will always be pros and cons to everything, but the values work really speaks to, if I can get really clear on what I need and what's most important to me right now, then that starts to help, I think, help support the decisions that we've made. If we understand why we've made the decision we've made, why we are where we are, that can be quite empowering, just that simple knowledge, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, just to add into that, what you'd said earlier about what's happening right now, because like for all of us, when we're in the moment, we're in the weeds, so to speak, and that's what we're seeing, and it feels really messy. But when you sort of have that moment to come out and look at it as a timeline, or whatever way works for you, but to have that perspective of, here I am now in terms of my career, and here's how old my children are. In 5 years' time, this could be happening. Not to use like a 5-year plan, but just to give some sort of perspective on, they're going to be this age, what's going to be happening for them around now, what will that mean for I think having that space, which you can't, which is one of the things I think we both offer, is that perspective of being able to look at a bigger picture, so that you're not making that sort of rushed and panicky decision about today. You're taking that more holistic view of, like, actually, for my whole life, what is important to me, what's going to be happening down the line, and what can I do today that's going to have an impact on that.
Absolutely, and that's such a powerful exercise to do. I do that in pretty much all my sessions where we're talking about career, and I'll go even ahead. I'll go 5, 10, 15, 20 years, actually step right back and look at the age your child is and you are, and what does that mean in terms of what they're going to need from you and what you want to be able to give to them. And I can tell you now that now my children are teenagers, what they need from me is completely different from what they needed from me when they were toddlers, and also what I want to be able to give to them, and what does that mean in terms of my career and the time and energy I can give to it. So I think that perspective is really powerful. The other one also is, often I find women are very ambitious. They want their career, they've worked hard for their career, and they don't want to lose it. And so there can be a bit of a pressure to, I've got to keep climbing, I've got to keep progressing, I've got to keep developing. And sometimes I just ask them the question, how old are you? When are you thinking you're going to retire? And of course, everyone's a different age when they're having babies. So it could be anywhere between, I don't know, 10 years time to maybe 30 years time. But that in itself is really powerful. Oh my God, I've actually got time. I don't need to rush. I've got 30 years ahead of me. I'm not even halfway through my career, even for some of them. And that in itself can be, oh, great. I can just relax and take a breath for a moment and just go, okay, what is it I need right now?
Yeah. And I think, just to end, if that's okay, and start wrapping up, but thinking of what you said before about, there probably isn't going to be a perfect way to come at this. So I think the questions we've shared today, just around, like, what does career mean to me? What does success look like now? Who am I now? And what support do I need? What help can I ask for? And those are the sort of questions that help you make the right decision for you. But there is no right or wrong answer. It's about really listening to yourself and making the right decision for you.
It's all part of the transition, isn't it? It's all part of the shift, change from one part, being one part version of you, to this new version of you. Shall we wrap up?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. Hope you've really enjoyed hearing our conversation today. And if you'd like to find out any more about the work that Laura and I do, please feel free to get in touch and we'll happily have a call with you. And please, continue to follow us. We share content on a regular basis. So thank you for listening and we hope it's been useful.